Well, things are changing faster than anyone could have predicted, and yet we have news of another massive win for China as countries around the world are building new alliances and shifting strategies to combat Donald Trump's trade war. In an unprecedented move that no one saw coming, the Japanese government has shifted away from the United States as the country is being forced to resist Trump's efforts to form a trade bloc against China. The article shares Japan intends to push back against any U.S. effort to bring it into an economic bloc aligned against China because of the importance of Tokyo's trade ties with Beijing. Japan doesn't want to get caught up in any U.S. effort to maximize trade pressure on China by curbing its own economic interaction with Beijing, which is Tokyo's biggest trading partner and an important source of goods and raw materials. Although the US hasn't made any specific requests to Japan regarding China, Tokyo would prioritize its own interest if that occurs. Japan has conveyed to China on multiple occasions that it doesn't fully align with the US on chip-related exports and semiconductor restrictions. And this is big news because Japan has made a 180-degree pivot and is now effectively defending China from the United States. There's no overstating how transformational this is because Japan has always aligned itself with the United States. I mean, let's not forget, Japan is home to over 120 active US military bases, the most of any nation outside the United States. But here is the main point that Donald Trump is missing in his trade war. Countries will always act in their best interest, and it's not in anyone's best interest to cut off trade with China or support a US-led trade bloc against China, who, let's not forget, is the #1 trading partner for over 120 countries around the world. But here is where things get very interesting, because Japan's government has been so shocked from the treatment it's received from the Trump administration that it has broken Japanese culture of being quiet and reserved, and Japanese officials are now speaking to the world and exposing the truth about negotiating with Donald Trump.
What the United States is saying is completely unreasonable. Their logic is all over the place, and there's no consistency at all. However, when Japan negotiates with what they are saying, to be frank, it's akin to being extorted by a delinquent. If Japan gives in, thinking it's a negotiation or a deal, and compromises on its position, it sets a bad precedent as a customary practice. If you give money to someone extorting you, they'll just come back to extort you again.
Let's just be honest. This trade war is embarrassing Trump and the United States on the international stage. A few months ago, it would have been inconceivable to think Japan would ever compare the US government to an extortionist. But this Japanese government official is spot on in his reasoning. If you give money to someone extorting you, they'll just come back to extort you again. And this is why Japan is so vocal in speaking out against Trump's trade negotiations. It's now been over a week since Japan's meeting with Trump, and still there is no deal in place, largely because Japan can't get an answer on what the US wants from a trade deal. Even right-wing reporters like Charles Gasparino from Fox News is calling out President Trump, stating the biggest problem is that the US keeps changing its ask in terms of exactly what it wants, but the lack of publicly announced deal progress is depressing the dollar and spiking bond yields. But even more incredible is the comments from Japan's government on how Trump's team doesn't even understand how to do basic math and calculate an accurate number for tariffs.
In the first place, even their equations are completely nonsensical. I wasn't good at math either, but if that equation appeared in a math test, it would definitely score 0. Since they're not a straightforward opponent, they won't listen to straightforward reasoning. Even though all options were mentioned, you must never show compassion to an opponent who isn't straightforward. If you ease up on them, it will set a bad example.
Once again, this is truly shocking to see a Japanese government official break his cultural customs of being modest and non-confrontational and speak so honestly about the US government's actions. But when Trump is fabricating numbers to support his tariff war, countries have no other option but to speak out. Like this Japanese official said, if your opponent is not straightforward, how can you show him compassion? But let's rewind the clocks and go back to April 2nd, Trump's famous Liberation Day, when he proudly took to the White House lawn and held up this tariff board, announcing a new round of tariffs against every country in the entire world. Take a look at this insight from journalist James Surowitzki, who writes, "Just found out where these fake tariff rates come from. For every country, they just took our trade deficit with that country and divided it by the country's export to us. So we have a $17.9 billion deficit with Indonesia, and its exports to the US are $28 billion. 17.9 divided by 28 equals 64%, which Trump claims is the tariff rate Indonesia charges us. Of course, this mathematical equation is completely inaccurate, and it's precisely why the Japanese official commented that this equation would score a 0 in a formal math test. So of course the next logical question is, how do you actually calculate the real effective tariff rate? And actually, it's pretty simple. You take the total amount of custom duties collected on goods from a country and divide it by the total value of imports from that country. For example, let's say the United States imported $28 billion worth of goods from Indonesia. If the US Customs collected $560 million in duties on those imports, then you would divide $560 million by $28 billion. That equals 2%, meaning the real effective tariff rate is just 2%. A trade deficit measures how much more we buy from a country than they buy from us. It has nothing to do with how much tax or tariff is actually being charged. So when Trump stands up and says Indonesia is charging us a 64% tariff, it's complete nonsense. The real number is dramatically lower because tariffs are based on duties collected, not the size of the trade deficit. Everyone, this is why Japan can't strike a deal with Trump's team. The people in charge of leading Trump's administration don't understand basic economics, but this chaos and confusion have not only angered our allies around the world, they have started to backfire on Trump domestically, right here in the United States. A brand new ABC poll this week shows that nearly 2/3 of Americans disapprove of Trump's tariffs, with over 71% of Americans now believing that tariffs will have a negative impact on inflation and sending prices skyrocketing for the average American consumer. Honestly, we are beginning to see things unravel for the US president, as it was announced earlier this week that Trump has achieved the lowest 100-day approval rating in 80 years. Perhaps most threatening to Trump, given his promise of an economic turnaround, is the extent of negative views on the economy. Just take a look at the results of this survey. 62% of Americans responded that the price for the things that they want or need are now going up, while 72% of Americans now believe that Trump economic policies will create a recession for the United States. But here's where things get even crazier for the US. China is the world's largest supplier of the raw materials, parts, and components that factories need to make finished products. Even if a product isn't made in China, it almost certainly contains parts or raw materials sourced directly from China. Today, every factory in Europe, Southeast Asia, and Latin America, and all around the world can purchase these materials from China at standard market prices. But what about American factories? Well, now they're forced to pay a 145% premium on the same Chinese goods because of Donald Trump's tariffs. The simple reality is that these tariffs didn't isolate China. They isolated American businesses. While the rest of the world continues to manufacture goods more efficiently and affordably, US factories are stuck operating at a significant disadvantage, driving up costs, shrinking margins, and pushing manufacturing jobs even further offshore. In the end, the tariffs became a self-inflicted wound on American competitiveness. And if you want a single metric to show whether Trump's tariffs are actually bringing manufacturing back to the US, look no further than the Philadelphia Fed Manufacturing Index. And the latest numbers are brutal. In April, the index came in at negative 26.4, a massive collapse from 12.5 the previous month and far below the expected 2.2. That's one of the lowest readings in recent memories, and it tells you everything you need to know. Manufacturing in America isn't coming back. It's actually falling apart. And once again, here's why. To manufacture anything, you need inputs, raw materials, parts, and components. And according to the National Association of Manufacturers, 56% of all US imports are manufacturing inputs. If you slap tariffs on those or make them harder to get, you don't revive American industry, you cripple it. Once again, here is where the great irony comes in for the United States. Because if we look at the data from the US Bureau of Labor Statistics, it was actually President Biden who created the most manufacturing jobs by any US president over the past 50 years. But let's be honest, Trump's policies will not bring manufacturing jobs back to America, and this sentiment is being echoed by some of America's most prominent voices, like Ken Griffin, the billionaire hedge fund manager from Citadel, who warned that the US is putting its global brand at risk as a result of the tariff policy. Ken goes on to state, he dreams of giving people their dignity back, and I have to applaud him for having that dream, but the dream is not going to come true. These jobs are not coming back to America, and to be clear, With an unemployment rate of 4%, America has moved on. And I have to agree with Ken Griffin, because America has moved on. But luckily for investors, other countries are open for manufacturing, and I'm actively looking at opportunities in Canada right now. Because once again, every country around the world is not self-inflicting these tariffs on themselves, and they still have access to the raw materials that manufacturers and factories actually need. Right now, Canada is united under the new Prime Minister Mark Carney, and I'd like to switch to the investing portion of today's video and tell you about a unique opportunity in one of the most important sectors for the future of our world. It's no secret that our planet is literally drowning in plastic, but the global plastic waste crisis is actually an amazing business opportunity. And today's video sponsor, Aduro Clean Technologies, has a powerful solution that's not only going to change the world, but also provide an excellent revenue stream to turn waste plastic into valuable resources. Every year, the world produces around 400 million tons of plastics. But incredibly, only 9% of that number is recycled. 50% of plastic waste ends up in landfills, with another 22% leaking into the environment. But the world is changing. Industries are shifting to renewable energy, consumers are shifting to electric cars, and there is a global movement towards more sustainability. North American and EU regulations now mandate recycled content in packaging, and as a result, the chemical recycling market is forecasted to grow from $15.7 billion in 2024 to $149 billion by 2034. That's a 10x increase in the next decade. But let's talk about Aduro's competitive advantage and why the company is in a great position to capitalize on the future of this important industry. Aduro Clean Technologies is redefining the landscape of chemical recycling through its proprietary hydrochemolytic technology, HCT, a transformative platform that offers a fundamentally different and superior approach to processing complex plastic waste. In contrast to conventional pyrolysis or hydrogen-intensive systems, Aduro's process leverages a water-based, lower-temperature chemical reaction to gently cut contaminated, mixed, and hard-to-recycle plastics into high-value outputs such as renewable fuels, specialty chemicals, and chemical precursors. This next-generation platform is modular and operates at significantly lower energy intensity with greater than 90% yield efficiency, positioning Aduro at the forefront of sustainable, economically viable recycling solutions. By eliminating the need for costly hydrogen and extreme temperatures, Aduro not only achieves substantially lower operating costs, which enables scale-up operations for the truly circular use of post-consumer and industrial waste, and with this, more waste plastics takes part in the circular economy. Furthermore, the HCT process is scalable and can adapt to varying locations. Imagine small-scale efficient systems scattered in many different locations. Aduro has established a clear, capital-efficient pathway toward commercialization with 5 core strategic initiatives. Number 1, pilot plant commissioning. The company is on track to complete and commission its pilot facility in Q3 2025, validating technology performance under scaled conditions. Number 2, demonstration plant development. In collaboration with NextGen Polymers, Aduro will initiate the design and development of its demonstration plant, a critical next step towards commercial deployment. Number 3, intellectual property expansion. Aduro's innovation is defensible and growing, with 8 patents granted and additional IP pending, further strengthening its sustainable advantage. Number 4, customer engagement program. Aduro is actively working with strategic partners on pilot programs, feedstock testing, and technology evaluation, accelerating market adoption and de-risking implementation. And number 5, commercialization and licensing strategy. Aduro is building the foundation for full-scale rollouts via licensing partnerships and direct builds, creating long-term recurring revenue opportunities. Aduro's differentiated value proposition has already attracted engagement from multinational energy and chemical leaders, including Shell and Total Energies, with a market cap of $136 billion, underscoring the platform's relevance, scalability, and potential for global impact. Just last month, Jesse Salbin from Boral Capital gave a positive outlook and financial forecast for the company, issuing a buy rating with a $50 target, which would imply a 10x upside from currency levels. The stock has already appreciated over 45% the past year. Sablon estimates the discounted free cash flow to be roughly $63 a share, while the discounted earnings per share valuation is $37 a share on average, out to $50 a share, and exactly where he thinks the stock could be going if the company can execute its 2025 plan accordingly. Aduro is listed on the NASDAQ and is already producing revenue from paid evaluations, but has a long-term upside from licensing and scaling its proprietary recycling system. As I always say on this YouTube channel, we study geopolitics because it moves markets, and there is a very bullish case for a company like Aduro as the world moves closer to renewable energies and environmentally friendly policies. With increased environmental regulation and zero direct competitors, Aduro has an incredible timing advantage. Their business model allows for both near-term revenue and long-term scale. Everyone, I personally love highlighting companies like Aduro because they are changing the world for the better, and in this case, using advanced technology to not only solve one of the most important problems of the modern world, but also create a valuable and sustainable business model that will allow it to expand its global reach even further. If you are interested in learning more about Aduro, I'm going to drop their website and investor presentation down in the description below. Please consult your financial advisor before making any investments. And as always, thank you for spending time with me here on YouTube. I thank you for your support, and I look forward to seeing you all in our next video soon.